Hey all, this is Mika here. I'm back with another video. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through changes to old Fortify, new Fortify, Empower, Weaken, Aversion, etc. and basically show how much that will affect your HP in terms of how tanky you will be on the live patch compared to the PTR patch. I'm going to introduce this by going over a spreadsheet I made that you can calculate how much HP that you'll be having based off values that you can take yourselves. I will go through some example builds that I have come up with in here and then walk through what the effective HP means here. And then at the end of this I will show you some interesting conclusions that I have come to with the help of this tool that I made. So starting off here, basically some background on what the main changes were in case you're sleeping under a rock. They have changed Fortify to go from this quadratic-like behavior, where Fortify was worth a lot more, to this more linear-like behavior where Fortify tends to be worth a lot less. There are some exceptions to this, like with SNS you can get to Fortify cap, and then this new Fortify will stack on top of your old Fortify, which makes you even tankier than it used to be on last patch. But for most cases, it was overall a nerf. The intention behind this nerf was to make it so that light players effectively couldn't live as well, and based off of that, they successfully implemented changes that will make it so light players will not be able to live as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce this sheet. This sheet is based off of some kind of math behind the scenes. I talked about this a little bit, but the effective HP, so this slope right here, this is like linear, and I figured out what that slope is. So basically in light, what you'll have is your Fortify will be worth about a fifth of what it used to be. In medium, it will be worth about a third. In heavy, it will be worth about 2/5 of what it used to be. And then with SNS, it's like 9/20 of what it used to be. So basically, Fortify is not as good as what it used to be, is what comes from this. This base effective HP percent, this is just what's inherent to playing a certain class. This is based off your armor weight. This is also based off of how much gear score that you have. That formula is contained in this in this Desmos thing, which I can link in the description below. But basically, this Fortify value here is the thing that changes, and then something like heavy, you can manually calculate that, and this is just a value that's based off of things like gear score and maximizing your armor weight per the class you have. So stuff like SNS will inherently be tankier than something like heavy. Medium will be tankier than light. Light will be less tanky than medium. And I have that all spread out in various sheets in for heat maps basically in this, so you could see relatively how tanky that you will be with certain new Fortify and Rend values across the board. The other interesting thing that you can see from this is if you actually look at like one of the corners, you can see that in light you will be affected less by Rend because this color is brighter, and versus something like heavy, you'll be affected more by Rend, which makes that color worth a little bit less bright. So that's kind of cool to see there. But that's what this actual base effective HP basically comes up with, and the effect of this effective HP per new Rend or Fortify, this is just that kind of slope that I was showing before. Effective HP, this is how tanky you are. It's as simple as that. Effective HP per HP percent. This is kind of comparing this to this, and basically your effective HP over how much that you will, or how tanky that you are as a base. And then this normalized one is basically saying, hey, I start off at 100%. How much more tanky am I now than I was before? So let's hop into some build examples. I can walk through the sheet at the end in case you want to actually play with it, but so some things that I noticed from actual build examples here. So I sorted everything by effective HP. You can see the builds that I have here, how much con they have, what weight class I'm looking at, and how tanky they actually are. You can also see some kind of interesting outliers here, like with the SNS in particular. If I were to zoom out a bit, SNS is the tankiest build on far right here, and SNS with Aversion with the new patch can be up to basically 10 times tankier than a 50 con BB, which is kind of funny to see. But 50 con BB on the live patch was playable because of how the Fortify worked. But this value for like shirking for like BB is no longer viable. basically with 50 con, and even 150 con, it's not super viable, and you have to change your build accordingly. You could see that aversion tends to be a lot more effective than something like shirking fort on new BB, and stuff like the fortify value will not be as impactful here. Some other outliers: 300 con, uh, S Great Axe Warhammer is actually a little bit tankier than what it used to be on the previous patch, so that's kind of nice to know. If you are probably not going to live with that 50 con BB anymore, you got a 33% HP nerf. If you go to a version, you can bump that up a little bit, uh, but you still, well, actually a lot of it, because it works quadratically like the previous Fortify does, but you will still be really, really weak to melee, and you will be really, really weak to things that the version does not affect. So you have to be really careful what you ward to, because that literally determines like a third of your HP right there, is how effectively you ward and what aversion that you run. And that's why I think something like Ice Spike could be good potentially. SNS got 23% tankier with this patch, which is kind of interesting. If you are a healer and you cast Orb on yourself, you actually won't gain any like actual effective HP due to how that works with Invig. I also did some like math of this related to Invig. Basically the threshold is, if you are in light and you cast a fortify on yourself, that fortify has to be greater than 9.5%, otherwise it will increase the amount of damage you take. In medium, you have to be able to cast a fortify that's worth over 6%, otherwise it'll increase the damage you take. In heavy, this is at 5%. I also tested this with the PTR and it came to the same conclusion. There's also something that I didn't really know at the time, where there's buffs like the BB right tree top right, the one where if you cast an ability you gain 3% fortify. Those count as individual buffs, which means even in heavy that will actually cause you to take more damage, because you're never actually getting above that 5% threshold, because each one counts as a buff and it's counted versus Invig. So basically that perk is utterly useless with this new change. The reason why it worked that way before and why it was effective before is because that was 3% versus 2%, but now the problem is it's like 1.5% versus 2% or something like that in heavy, so you're actually going to increase the amount of damage that you take by a little bit. So in general, there are some perks like that that are no longer worth running. If you're a healer and you try to orb yourself, you're actually not gonna take more damage, but you're not gonna take less damage, basically. And there's a certain point with the Shirking Fort too, where that does not really matter. You basically have to get above 3 Shirking Fort in light for your Shirking Fort to be beneficial. You have to get above 2 Shirking Fort in medium for your Shirking Fort to be beneficial, and heavy you need to get above 2 as well. Shirking Fort values combine into each other, so that's not as important as some of the other values. Some other things that I kind of came to with conclusions from this: in medium, you are 17% tankier than you are in light, which is nice to know. In heavy, you're 31% tankier than you are in light, and you're 12% tankier than you are in medium. SNS in particular tends to be tankier than even heavy is. Aversion is 4 times better in light than in medium. In medium, it's 3 times better, or sorry, aversion is 4 times better than fortify in light, and aversion is 3 times better than fortify in medium and 2.5 times in heavy. Why is that interesting? Aversion can protect you against one specific type and that specific type that's not bugged. So aversion can only cover, if you say you're doing a physical aversion, because that one actually works versus everything, that will just cover ranged physical attacks. You will not be warded at all to elemental attacks. You will not be warded at all to melee attacks. So in light, that is worth it, because you are 4 times, you're benefiting 4 times the amount of so it tends to be worth it. In medium, that can tend to be about neutral, and in heavy, it's a little bit worse than fortify if you consider the broad range that fortify covers. So basically what this means is Shirking Fort is actually beneficial to run in heavy. In medium, it doesn't really matter what you go for as much. But if you are going against specifically Fire Staffs and you're dying to Fire Staffs, the version will obviously be better there. But if you're talking about general coverage, it doesn't really matter. Like if you're a person that wants to do 10-10 split with your gems, not really worry about anything, and just get as much Fortify as you want, I think stacking Shirking Fort is still fine in medium and heavy. But in light, you should definitely go with aversion. And if you are more worried about stuff like fire staffs and, I guess, ranged void attacks, because it doesn't even work versus the most ranged ice attacks, then I would consider going Aversion in medium and heavy. There are some other aspects with that too that are like impact a little bit later on, but as a base, that's how that works. Rend and Fortify affects heavy a lot more than medium and light. You can see this visually from heat maps that I'll show here. If you like pay attention to say this like top right corner-ish, and then you go to heavy, you'll see that that gets less bright. That basically means that in heavy you are affected by the rend more, and you will have less effective HP for that amount of con than you would in light and in the medium. And heavy SNS is affected the most by Rend and Fortify. What this basically means is Rend is probably worth still running on point, but off of point I don't think Rend is nearly as good. So if you're throwing an orb next patch, it probably should be on. Well, actually, orb's different because orb is the old Rend, so that should be on point. But if you're doing some sort of new Rend, that should be generally thrown onto point because it will actually affect the people on point, but won't really affect the people off of point as much. Armor weight bonuses are really, really important to maximize these values because everything works off of this like base number that I was calculated from this other giant formula that I just kind of took and threw in here, which you don't really want to go through, but basically you want to get to 625 gear score next patch as much as possible. Rend and Fortify range from about half effectiveness to fifth effectiveness, depending if it's versus a heavy or medium or light player. That is a big deal compared to what is on the live too, because on live it was it wasn't exponential, it was quadratic. So basically, the more rend that you had on someone, the faster they would die, and it would like kind of compound, if you will, on the actual a PTR that won't compound, and it's always linear. So it doesn't really matter how much rend you have on someone; they'll just flat increase more damage. Like if you're gonna land a what do you call it, an armor breaker, for example, a heavy player will take 8% more damage versus a light player will take like 5% more damage. So that you have to judge that if that's beneficial to you or not still. And you probably should avoid stacking buffs that could be taken advantage of with Invig itself. So Invig can basically works off each individual buff. So if you're doing shirking Empower, each one of those individual ticks will cause you to take 2% more damage. So you're going to do more damage, but you're also going to take more damage. You're going to gain that 4% damage, but then you're going to take 2% more damage. You have to judge the pros and the cons of that. That is worth. That is something that was known before, but not really tested. And now after this testing, it's kind of more clear. And then lastly, I'll kind of walk through this sheet here. So basically what this allows you to do, I have it so that if you get to 200 con, you get that 200 con bonus, which is why this effective HP percent is not the same as this base HP one for 200 con, but is the same with under that. So you can kind of pick whatever con you want. The base damage itself, if you go negative here, this is your Empower, and then if you go positive here, this is your Weakened. I put those at the Empower caps and the Weaken cap. Empower cap is officially negative 50%, but you can go past that a little bit with Invig and stuff like gems. You can actually get a beyond the 70%, but I don't think it's super realistic to do that all the time, so I just capped it at that for now. If other people want me to change it, I could change that in the future. This old Fortify value, this is the ranges that you have for the next patch. The negative 15% is from a Void Gauntlet rending you, and the 50% is basically being in an SNS shield and then having the extra 20% gems. There is a way to get beyond this negative 50% if you're an onslaught and you get hit by an orb, but that's kind of rare, so I didn't put that in here, but I could throw that back in if someone wants to play with that. The new Fortify value, the caps here, you could go to negative 70% rend, or you can go to 200% Fortify. There's basically no class that gets to 200% Fortify, even at SNS, because the buff that you gain from Defiant Stance is actually not considered to be new Fortify, and it's something akin to old Fortify, but the main problem with that is it's like a 45-second cooldown that can be stripped probably one Oblivion, and Oblivion tends to be run a lot near point, and that's where you've run into those builds. And yeah, that's the main thing with this. You could kind of play with all the buttons here. I'll link this in my Discord and put my Discord in the description. But I tested this with a bunch of different builds and came to some interesting results that you can walk through here, but I don't want to walk through all those here today. And I'll see you guys in the next video.